Hello everyone. In today's session, let's talk about ECS task definition creation for Fargate and EC2 capacity plan. As part of it, on this AWS account, last time we have created ECS cluster. Now let us see how to create a task definition by using visual editor mode. Task definition. As of now, I don't have any definition that is defined for this particular cluster. Here in the drop-down list, we have two options. Either we can create a task definition with the visual editor mode, or we can use a JSON file. If you are familiar with JSON file, then you can write it. Or else if you are new to this particular concept, I would say you better go with new task definition with editor mode. Let us select that. Here we have to pass some options in order to create a definition. First, let me specify the name of this particular definition. For example, since I want to deploy Nginx web server, I will write a name as Nginx web server. After that, infra. As per the infra requirement, I want to use either two options or only one option that you have to specify. For example, it will select with AWS Fargate, which is a serverless compute to launch your containers. Or else, if you want to use self-managed infra of EC2, then you can select this EC2 instances. Choice is ours. For now, if you want to select both of these options, you can just enable this checkbox as well. And one more point that you need to remember is, here you might be having few functionalities that will be enabled, and here you might be seeing some functionalities that will be enabled. You need to consider that particular point as well, which is written here. Now, if I scroll down, what is the operating system? Network mode will be only AWS VPC by default. This is related to the VPC network what we are using for our cluster. Even the task will get an IP address from that VPC subnet. We are not using any Docker network here. By default, it is enabled with AWS VPC. If you want to use any other option, then you have to remove the Fargate. Then you can use EC2 instance. Because in the Fargate profile, it will accept only AWS VPC. We can't use Docker network as well. If you really want to use Docker network instead of using AWS VPC, go for EC2 instance, not for Fargate. Now let me enable this option as well. After that, task size. How much resource you want to allocate to your task. Remember that particular task could have one container or more than one container that you might be launching. So take that particular point into consideration. For now, I want to allocate 1 core CPU and 1 GB RAM. Let me try to specify it. This is sufficient to run a basic Nginx container inside the task. Now, for your task, we have to assign a role. Why? Because on behalf of you, your task might be running some API calls on AWS services. That's the reason we have to select a role, which we have created in the previous sessions. That is ECS task execution role. Not only that, we have task execution role as well. What is the benefit of it? You have an agent running on the compute. That agent wants to communicate to some of the AWS services in order to pull some information or to do some action on behalf of us. For example, if I want to launch an application inside the task for a container, it has to pull the image. That image is available in the ECR. Now it has to authenticate and then it has to pull the image. Who will do that? Your task execution. Means the agent on that particular compute node will contact on behalf of you with this role, and it will provide some actions and it will download the image. That's what it does. So one is task role and one is task execution role. Nothing but container agent. Task placement we are not going to talk about right now for this scenario. Next one. How many containers you want to launch? What are those specifications? Till now we have selected how you want to select your infra to spin up your task on the compute. Now the next one is container. Here I want to launch only one container for this scenario inside this particular task. So let me give a name to the container as Nginx. And for now, I want to use image from Docker Hub. Let me specify name as Nginx. If you want to use a specific tag, then we have to provide 1.25.0. Now it is asking you, is it essential container? Yes. What is a mandate container inside this particular task? This is the main container. That is called as essential. And then private registry. Since I'm using public registry right now to pull this image from Docker Hub, I don't need to enable this option. When I talk about ECR, then I will show you how to enable this option and what are the parameters we have to pass. For now, no need to enable. Next, port mapping. Your container which will be running an application inside it will be listening on 80 port number because it is an Nginx web server. It listens by default on 80 port number. So leave this option as it is. How much resource you want to allocate to this container? For the task we have allocated around 1 core CPU, 1 GB RAM. In this, how much resource you want to allocate from that particular maximum limit we have given to the task to this container. Your value should not cross beyond the task resource, the value what I passed. That's the only thing what you have to take care, and you have to distribute the resource. For now, I want to allocate the total resource what I have allocated to the task. 1 core CPU and then 1 GB RAM. There is no soft limit which I am providing right now. If you want to specify it, let me try to give 0.5. Means 50% of 1 GB of memory. Next, environment variables. For example, after spinning up the container inside the task, if you want to pass some variables, it might be needed by your software inside the container, or it might be needed by your application or by the script running inside the container. Instead of me passing it, I want my container to have an environment variable with the value, and that will be utilized. In those conditions, we can pass either environment variables individually, or we can write environment variables in a .env file, and we can store the .env file in S3 bucket. Even we can specify like that. And here, if you enable this option, we have to provide the bucket location with the object name. That's the only thing what you have to do. Skip this particular step because we are not talking about environment variables as of now. Let me scroll down, logging. Since I'm running container inside this particular ECS cluster, what are the logs that has been generated for the container? I want to pull it in CloudWatch so that I can monitor for analysis purpose or for troubleshooting purpose. I want to pull the container logs. In a Docker engine, what we used to do, Docker logs command and the container name or ID. When you specify that, it will pull the logs and it will show you the info. Similar to that, even though I don't have access to the node and run the Docker CLI commands, I can go to the CloudWatch and I can see the logs of individual container of this particular task. For that, we have enabled Amazon CloudWatch, and our logs will get stored on the log group called /ECS/Nginx web server with the name of the task. You can see. Now it is going to create a log group with all these parameters enabled. Other parameters we'll discuss one by one. For now, it is not mandated. The options are like restart policy, health check, startup dependency ordering, container timeouts, container network settings, Docker configurations, resource limits, and Docker labels. Later, we will talk about these options one by one. For now, it is not mandated. If you want to spin up another container in this particular task, you have to say add container. You are trying to define the second container if you want to spin up for this particular task. For now, I don't want it. I can say remove. Storage, we have a session for it in order to discuss about how to integrate EBS volume to your ECS cluster for application and EFS storage as well for the ECS cluster. And then we have monitoring as well. We have already enabled the logs for this particular container which is getting created. In the same way, if you want to monitor the metrics of this particular resources, then you can enable this option. Since it is optional right now, I'm going to skip this. Finally, tags. I don't want to specify anything as of now. After specifying all these particular parameters, if you are okay to this, then we can select create. Now it is going to create a task definition. What went wrong? The CPU and memory combination you have selected is not valid. Okay, it is not accepted. I'll do one thing. For the system, I have given 2 core CPU, 4 GB RAM, EC2 instances. Since I cannot select this, I'll go for 1 core CPU and 0.5 core CPU, and 1 GB RAM is also not accepted. I'll do one thing. I'll just go back here. Here I have to specify 0.5. Any other? These are fine. Now it is going to create task definition. What is the capacity we have allocated? 512 units. If you want to calculate in units, 1 core CPU is equal to 1024 units. In the percentage point of view, it is 0.5%. 1% is equal to 1024 units. Half of that in the sense what? 512 units. That's what we have allocated to the task. And what's the memory we have allocated? 1024 MB. Nothing but 1 GB it is. How much we have given to this particular container? Same specifications. But the soft limit is 0.5 and the maximum limit is 1 GB for this container. For now, we have successfully created a task definition with minimal parameters. Thank you.